All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see everybody. This is our third class on the Haggadah. The first two classes were an introduction, and today, or this evening, we are starting with the Haggadah itself. If you have a Haggadah to follow along with, I'm sure it would be very helpful. I'm going to read and explain the Haggadah along with some laws, practical laws, what to do, as well as some beautiful insights, some life-changing insights on the Haggadah. So if you have your Haggadah close by, go for it and pick it out. It's going to help you. All right. We are starting. The very first step in the Haggadah is Kadesh. That is the Kiddush. Before we start with the Kiddush, I want to mention something that may be known to many, but some might not know, that Moses himself, Moshe Rabbeinu, is not mentioned in the entire Haggadah. You won't find his name. You'll only find his name quoted once by the Az Yashir, but it's no mention to Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, being our savior, our deliverer, our messenger, at all. And obviously the question begs, why? We speak about the Jewish people, we speak about so many of our Talmudic, our Mishnaic scholars, but there's no mention of Moses at all. Why is that? So, the answer given, and I'll quote it for you, it is given by Rabbi Reuven Margaliot. He writes as follows. He says that deliberately our sages who put together the Haggadah did not put Moses' name in the Haggadah in order that no one should ever make a mistake and think that it was Moses who took us out of Egypt, because it was one and one only who took us out, and that was God. Moses was a messenger. He was the deliverer. Great merit goes to Moses. However, it was God himself who takes us out of Egypt. It was God himself, and it was not a shaliach, not a messenger. It was not a malach, not an angel, no celestial being besides for God himself. And for that reason, Moses is not going to be found in our Haggadah, except for one verse where it just means that everyone believed in God and Moses, his servant. So again, making sure that Moses is not the icon of the Exodus, rather it is God. That's one thing I wanted to mention. Second thing I wanted to mention before we start the Haggadah is that the whole Haggadah should be said by the leader of the Seder. Meaning, the different parts that are read here and there, basically the most part of the Magid, the Haggadah itself, that could be read by multiple people. If a person could read everything themselves, it's proper to. But the leader should be reading everything, meaning he doesn't need to read it out loud himself, but he should be following along at least. However, when it comes to the blessings, the leader of the Seder should be the one making all the blessings. Like the man of the house is the one who does Kiddush on Friday night, the man of the house, or whoever is leading the Seder, should also be the one reading the Kiddush and making all the blessings on behalf of everybody. Just like on Shabbat, not everyone's holding their own cup and only one person is making the blessing. The only difference is that here everyone's going to be holding their own cup because they all need a drink. However, the blessing should only be made by the leader of the Seder. The only exception is if the leader of the Seder is not pronouncing the words properly, or if he's not able to have the proper intentions, as we're soon going to see there are plenty of intentions that a person should have during the Seder. If they're not able to understand what's going on, or maybe you have a deeper understanding and you want to do it yourself, then that is permitted. But ideally, it should be done by the leader of the Seder. The reason for this is because normally a mitzvah that can be done by multiple people is greater than one. Where do we learn this from? I'm going to share this with you. King Solomon writes. See over here, Proverbs chapter 12, verse 28. It says, Berov am Hadrat Melech. It's the king's glory. Sorry, the king's glory is in a multitude of people, which, as explained in the Talmud, is that to perform a mitzvah when there are more people present, or more people involved in the mitzvah, rather, that mitzvah holds more weight and it penetrates closer to God more than anything else. So for that reason, ideally, the one person should be making the blessing, and everybody should be answering amen. The same is for the matzah, the same is for the maror, the same is for every blessing being made, except for the washing of the hands blessing, because everyone does that on their own. But all other blessings should be made by one person, and everyone answers amen, and then they partake in whatever blessing that brought about. Okay, those are the two things. So no Moses being mentioned, and all the blessings should be made by the leader of the Seder. Next, starting with Kadesh, everybody should rinse their cups in and out, and should fill their cups. It's proper that, and this is a tradition which should be upheld in the spirit of freedom and royalty and dignity, that you should not fill up your own cup. Everybody should be filling up someone else's cup. It's a beautiful scene for everyone taking care of someone else, so that's how it should be. You should serve the person next to you, and then the person next to them, or right back to you, but no one should be serving themselves. This is specifically when it comes to the cups of that we drink, the 4 cups. So try to make sure that is done properly. You rinse the cups in and out, and then you fill them up with wine. After they're filled with wine, we take 3 little drops of water and we drop them in. You can either take it from a bottle or from another cup, or you can even just dip your knife or a fork or a spoon into a cup of water and then just tap, like dip in and tap 1, 2, and 3 times, 3 drops in the water, which is the proper thing that we shall do. Why 3 drops? 3 is relating to, as the Ben Ish Chai says, Maleh yadenu mibirchotecha, that we are telling God that we shall fill our hands through His blessings. The acronym of Maleh yadenu mibirchotecha is also Maim, Mem, Yud, and Mem. So this is why we add extra water to our wine, because we want to fill our cup, our hand, full of God's blessing. Also, the concept of diluting your wine is also alluding to the concept of compromising, and that's why some have a tradition that's the wife who actually dilutes the wine of her husband in order to teach him the great lesson: make sure you learn how to compromise. Next, let's go through. If anyone has a Haggadah, please open up. This year, since the Seder is going to be on Wednesday night and then on Thursday night, so we are not adding in the part for Shabbat, and we're starting directly from Ele Moadeh. Again, before we will mention all 15 steps. We'll sing it, Kadesh, Urchatz. You'll read all 15 of them, and then we go right to the Kiddush. The Kiddush starts with Ele Moadeh Adonai Mikra'e Kodesh Asher Tikrotam B'Moadam, which is the verse in the Torah that tells us that these are the holidays. Which holidays is it speaking about? Specifically the 3 main holidays: Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Vaydaber Moshe et Moadei Hashem el Bnei Israel, and Moses taught us all of the holidays for us to observe. We do this all standing up, like all Kiddushes. We stand it up, we say El Moadeh, then we make the blessing of Savri Maranan, and then everyone answers L'chaim, and then we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri hagefen. Blessed you, God, Master of the world. Thanking God for creating the grapevine. We do not drink yet. Still standing up, we have a second blessing, and that is the blessing of Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Am. We're thanking God for choosing us, selecting us out of all the other nations of the world. V'romemanu Mikol Lashon, and He raised us up with our tongue, specifically with our very special language, and that is the Hebrew language. V'kideshanu b'mitzvotav, and He sanctified us by giving us the mitzvot, our commandments in the Torah. Vatiten lanu Hashem Elokeinu ba'ava, and God gave us with His love Moadim lesimcha, these holidays to rejoice in, and Chagim uzmanim lesason, and all of these very other specific holidays, every holiday that we have, in order to be joyous and to be happy altogether. Which day are we talking about? Which holiday are we observing? And that is Et Yom Chag HaMatzot Hazeh, the holiday of Matzot, which we will address. Is this called holiday of Matzot or holiday of Passover? Wait a moment. And then Et Yom Tov Mikra Kodesh Hazeh, this happy day, where there's a difference between Yom Tov and Shabbat. Yom Tov is a holy day, however Shabbat is even holier. The difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov, besides for the little differences that we have in our prayer, is that on Yom Tov we are allowed to cook as well, and anything related to cooking, opposed to Shabbat where we're not allowed to cook in any way. Then we mentioned that it's Ziman Cherutenu, it is the time of our freedom, because that's when we were freed from Egypt. Be'ahavan, we say thank you, God, for doing this out of love, Mikra Kodesh, that He gave us this holiday out of His immense love for us. Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, obviously, for the memory, for us to remember that God took us out of Egypt. Why did He take us out of Egypt? Kivanu b'charta v'otanu kidashta mikol amim, because He chose us. He chose Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and his descendants. He pulled us out of Egypt. And He chose us, selected us amongst all the other nations. U'moadeh kodshecha b'simcha v'sason ilchatanu. And He gave us as an inheritance, as this tremendous gift, all of our holidays to rejoice in. And then we end off, Baruch Ata Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael v'azmanim. Blessed are you, God, who sanctified the Jewish people and their holidays. This is the Kiddush. We are still standing at this point. There's one more blessing that's going to be made before we sit down and we drink the wine, and that is going to be the blessing of Shechianu, where we say Shechianu v'kiyemanu v'gianu lazman hazeh, which we mentioned in the previous class. That we're supposed to have 8 things in mind. I'm not going to repeat them now, but you could go back, or you could refer to the PDF that I sent out to everybody. The 8 things we should have in mind when we're thanking God for sustaining us and keeping us alive and bringing us to this very happy holiday. At this point, after making the Geffen blessing, and then the holiday blessing, and then the Shechianu blessing, we are to sit down. Each person is to sit down with their cups, no talking, recline, as we said, either on an armchair like this, or put your left hand on your table, move your chair at a 45-degree angle, and then go like this. Whichever way you're going to do it, at this point is when you sit down and you drink your wine. Make sure it's on the left side, whether you are a righty or a lefty, and that we mentioned why in the previous class. Let's see if I'm missing anything with regards to that. All right, now, a couple things that we should understand. There are 4 differences between this Kiddush and every other Shabbat and holiday Kiddush. Difference number 1 is that normally on every other type of Kiddush, right after we do the Kiddush, we go and we wash our hands for bread. However, this time, during this Kiddush, we do not go and wash our hands right away. Rather, we're going to wash our hands, but not for the bread, and we're not starting the meal. So the first difference between this Kiddush and other Kiddushes is that we are not starting the meal right after this Kiddush, while every other Kiddush, we start the meal right away. That's the first difference. Second difference we mentioned is that normally we all serve every Friday night, every Shabbat morning, every holiday, we serve ourselves, we pour ourselves the wine. However, here we make sure that someone else serves us at this point. We should serve someone else should serve us, and that's all displaying the freedom and dignity and royalty that we have. Next is, on all other Shabbats and holidays, if a person does not have wine or grape juice, they do have the possibility of doing Kiddush on bread. This is not possible for the Seder night, for the Haggadah. Or, the Kiddush that we do in the morning can be even done, according to the Ashkenazic tradition, with hard liquor. Not for Sephardics, but for the Ashkenazic tradition. According to all traditions, according to all Jewish law, the Passover Seder night has to be done Kiddush with wine or grape juice. There's no other substitute. We mentioned in last class it should be red wine specifically, or grape juice, but it has to be wine. That's the third difference. The fourth difference, this is a pretty big one, this may be a shocker to many of you, is that on this Kiddush, every single person has to drink from the wine. You're not going to be able to just let the person making the blessing drink the wine, and then you are fulfilling the obligation. We each have our own obligation to drink 4 cups of wine or grape juice, and this is not like every other Kiddush. Every other Kiddush, we like to, and we try to always drink from the wine. However, it's not an absolute obligation. So again, Shabbat and all the other holidays, it's not an obligation to taste from the wine. However, the Pesach Seder, it is an absolute obligation for each and every person to drink from the their own cup of wine. Those are the four differences. Next, I wanted to address, in the halakha it's mentioned that if a person does not have enough money to buy oil to light Hanukkah candles, they need to sell some of their clothes in order to get enough money to buy oil to light Hanukkah candles. There's only one other mitzvah. There's two mitzvot that we do this by. The other mitzvah is that if a person does not have enough money to buy grape juice or wine for the Passover Seder, they should also go and sell their items, some of their clothes, and go and buy wine or grape juice. The question I'm proposing is, why is it only by these two mitzvot? We don't find this, if you don't have money to buy a sukkah, you don't have money to buy talit or tefillin or anything else for that matter, we don't say, our sages don't tell us, go and sell something that you have in order to buy it. However, by these two mitzvot, one a rabbinic one, that's lighting the candles of Chanukah, and another rabbinic one, which is drinking the 4 cups on the Seder night, we are told to go sell something we have in order for these two. Why only these two and nothing else? So the answer is that if we look at these two miracles went above the natural course of nature. They were above derech hateva, as we say in Hebrew. And because God went above and beyond, when He saved us from the Greeks during Chanukah, when He saved us from the Egyptians during the Exodus, God really went above and beyond for us as a nation. So too, when it comes to commemorating and remembering these very, very happy and special, miraculous events that God performed for us, we should also go above and beyond. Now, we should not know from any financial struggles, we should not know from it, but the concept is a beautiful concept. The concept is that God went above and beyond for us. If we would need to, we would go above and beyond for these two great, miraculous, the most miraculous miracles that He performed for us, and that was the Exodus of Egypt, as well as saving us from the Greeks during the Chanukah era. That answer was given by the Chidushei Harim. Next, what is the name of this holiday? So we already see in the Kiddush that the holiday is mentioned as Chag HaMatzot. In our Torah, the Torah refers to our holiday as Chag HaMatzot. In our prayer, if you open up your Machzor, it's going to say again, Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of Matzah. However, in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, and throughout our Haggadah, the holiday is referred to, and our common language as well. The holiday is mentioned as Chag HaPesach. So what's the name of our holiday? Is it Chag HaMatzot, or is it Chag HaPesach? Matzot referring to the matzah, and Pesach referring to the Paschal offering. Which one is it? Normally you have something and there's one name to it. Why is there two names? So listen to the following. The following is answered to us by the Ben Ish Chai. Anyone who gets, if you didn't order yet, make sure to get your Haggadah. The Ben Ish Chai Haggadah. The Ben Ish Chai answers this question by saying as follows. The Torah is the source for the concept of Chag HaMatzot, because that's how it's referred to in the Torah. According to the Torah, as it was in the time of the temple, the only mitzvah that was able to be fulfilled all 7 days during Passover was eating matzah. Eating the Passover sacrifice was only on the first night by the Seder. And therefore, the holiday related to or referred to as in the Torah is Chag HaMatzot, which includes all 7 days, opposed to just the first night, or the first day. However, in the time of the Mishnah, and in the time of the Gemara, which was after the destruction of the temple, at that point, the sages said, we want to remember the temple. We want to remember the service we were able to fulfill in the temple. And what was that? That was bringing the Paschal sacrifice. So whenever they relate to the holiday, they refer to it as Pesach. in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, and even in our common language on the calendar. It says Pesach, Passover, not Chag HaMatzot. And the reason for this is because we are continuing to yearn and to believe in our good faith and trust that God will rebuild the temple for us, and we will be able to bring the Paschal sacrifice again. When it comes to our prayers were instituted by Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the Great Assembly of Men. They were during the Second Temple, so the Passover sacrifice was being brought, and for that reason they didn't need to call the holiday Pesach. They referred to it rather as Chag HaMatzot because they had the sacrifice being brought, and then they were now mentioning the 7-day obligation that we have of eating matzah. Yom Tov, as we mentioned in the Haggadah, we refer to the holiday or our holidays as Yamim Tovim Yom Tov, which means a good day. So what does that mean, that the holiday is a good day? So from here we learn what the difference is between our nation, the Jewish nation, and others. Meaning, we are the chosen people, we have this obligation, this responsibility, but there's a very big difference between what we do and what others do with our free time. Is it used for vanity, emptiness, entertainment, levity, or is it used for productive actions, for attaining new spiritual heights and growths? And this, the Ben Ish Chai offers, is the difference between us as the Jewish nation and the other nations. Is that we hasten our opportunities and every moment of our life like literally gold coins. And he gives a beautiful parable to explain the fact. Very, very obnoxious type of conversation. But there were two people, he says, imagine, two people which were arguing which of the two were wealthier. So the first person says, well, I'm way wealthier than you. I have this, and this. Another one says, no, I have more than you, and I'm richer than you because I have this, and this. And the two said, you know what, let's make an agreement. So one of the fellows said, let's each go to the bank and pull out a whole sack of gold coins. And together, we're going to go onto a boat, we're going to set out sail in the ocean, and one by one, we're going to throw one gold coin at a time out. And the one who stops first, because it's showing that it's hurting them to part from that money because I guess they don't have enough, at that point we would know which one is really wealthier. So the two of them did it. They went, they each brought a sack of gold coins, and they come. However, the one who offered this was a little clever. He was scheming. He didn't really come with gold coins. He came with copper coins which were shined to look like gold. So to him, when he was throwing them off, it was no problem. Copper, and the other one was sending off gold. At a certain point, the one who was really throwing away gold says, I can't continue, I'm stopping. Okay, you win, you're richer than me. The Ben Ish Chai says, the moral of this parable is we treat our time, our precious time, our extra time, our free time as gold. We use every opportunity that we have for growth, for spiritual connection, connecting to God, learning our Torah. He says that our Torah is referred to as good. King Solomon says it. Sharing it. King Solomon in Proverbs chapter 4 verse 2. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al ta'azovu. For I gave you good teaching. Forsake not my Torah or my instruction. From here we learn that Torah study is good. And what do people do on a good day, on a Yom Tov? Why did God even give us Yamim Tovim? Why did He give us the Shabbat, days of rest? In order to connect to God through His Torah, to elevate our levels of spirituality. And therefore, says the Ben Ish Chai, that a Jew was like, or the Jewish nation was like that individual who was really throwing away gold coins, and precious to him, each and every one. We use our time very preciously. But the other nations, what are they going to do? They're going to involve themselves in entertainment and sports and other things, which are all seemingly important, but not like a gold coin. As Jews, we have to realize that the Yom Tov, the good day, was to do great things with it. And that is to learn Torah, pray, connect to God, and always do the greatest of things. The next step in our Haggadah is Urchatz. Urchatz is when we wash our hands without a blessing. We wash our hands like we do when we eat bread. So that would be 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. Not like in the morning where we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rather the same way that we do bread. 3 times washing the right hand, and then 3 times washing the left hand. The halakha requires us to do this because according to the basic halakha, the proper halakha is that anytime somebody anybody is going to eat something or get into contact with one of the 7 liquids which do bring upon impurity, meaning they will make something susceptible to becoming impure, then we are obligated to wash our hands like doing netilat yadayim. However, since it is a dispute, a machloket, if that is an obligation or not, therefore we wash without a blessing. The 7 liquids are wine, blood, oil, olive oil, milk, dew, honey, and water. So for our purposes, if a person were to, according to the basic letter of the law, take a tea biscuit and dip it into their coffee, they should be going and washing their hands netilat yadayim without a blessing. Anytime our hands get in contact with our food and liquid with our food, we have an obligation to do netilat yadayim without a blessing. The only time we make a blessing is when we eat bread. Now, the truth is that all year long, people are not so diligent in this halakha. And there's maybe room for that because, again, it's a dispute if there's that obligation with a blessing, without a blessing at all. So there is room for that. However, on Passover, we are stringent to uphold that law, and that's why everyone goes and washes their hands without a blessing, netilat yadayim, before we take the celery or carrot or potato, however else you're going to use as your karpas, and dip it in salt water. So you're taking food and you're dipping it in water. That's why we do netilat yadayim. Another explanation why we do netilat yadayim at this point is because we are about to say the Haggadah, and the Haggadah, this comes from the Darkei Moshe, Rav Moshe Isserlish, one of the great Torah scholars. He is actually the one who commented on the Shulchan Aruch according to the Ashkenazic tradition. He writes that the Haggadah, which we're about to start, is a form of prayer. And it's a form of praise and thanks to God that we are thanking Him for taking us out of Egypt. And for that reason, we do netilat yadayim before we start the Haggadah, just like we would do netilat yadayim without a blessing before we pray. Again, our hands are going to be clean before we pray, and that's why we do the netilat yadayim. One thing which is interesting to mention is that if we look at the stage that we use before this washing, the tagline or the name is Urchatz. Urchatz means a command, go wash. However, when it comes to washing our hands before the matzah, it just says rochza. So why is this Urchatz as a command, and later on it's just rochza as a step? And to that, the answer is given is that we always wash our hands before we eat bread or before we eat matzah. So we don't need a command to go do that. However, since this halakha is not so common to us, it's not always upheld, therefore the Baal Haggadah, the rabbis who put together the Haggadah, or the Seder, they said, command, go wash, because we normally don't do it, reminding us to make sure that we do it. Next on the steps of the Seder is Karpas. Karpas, as we mentioned, is either going to be a celery, a carrot, or a potato. Make sure you have prepared beforehand. And we eat less than a kazait, meaning less than 27 grams or 30 grams shall be eaten. The reason for this is because we do not want to eat so much that we will have to maybe do a bracha achronan after blessing again, because the after blessing that we're going to make is going to be the one that's going to be birkat hamazon later on. And we're going to be doing netilat yadayim and hamotzi. So in order that we don't confuse ourselves, do we need to make an after blessing or do we not have to make an after blessing? Therefore, this vegetable, this karpas, should only be eaten in a small amount. So everyone will take their piece. I'm going to just use an example, the celery, and they're going to dip it in the salt water. It is important to make sure that there is at least one piece left of whatever karpas you're using, the celery, let's say, on the Seder table, on the Seder plate. the Seder plate always needs to be complete. So even when it comes to the charoset and anything else that we take from the Seder plate should always have one of each of its original ingredients, and therefore make sure you have at least another piece for your Seder plate. Next, we make a blessing of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam boreh peri ha'adama, and that's the only blessing, like we make on any type of vegetable. It's the only blessing that we make when we take the karpas. So everyone dips, makes a blessing, and then eats. Here again, the leader of the Seder should be the one that makes the blessing, and everyone answer Amen, because everyone coming together. But if the leader of the Seder is not making the blessing properly, or it doesn't have the proper intentions, then you can make it for yourself. One should have in mind when they're making this boreh peri ha'adama that they're also equating the vegetable that they're going to use as maror, as well as the vegetable they're going to put in their korech, in their sandwich. Even though those two come after we make a hamotzi, and they really are acquitted by the hamotzi bread, the hamotzi blessing, the blessing on the matzah, however, it's still proper to have in mind the adama for the maror, as well as the bitter herbs, as well as the vegetable we're going to put in the korech. Next, the reason why the Ben Ish Chai writes that we do karpas right after the kiddush is because we want to arouse the attention of our children. Normally, right after we do kiddush, we wash our hands and we go and we eat bread. So too we should go right to eating matzah. The reason why it was placed over here, seemingly out of order, is in order to just have the kids question, why are we washing twice? Why are we washing without a bracha? Why are we eating something now? All of this is only to gain the arousal and the attention of the children, to keep them engaged in this very important mission that we have of going through the Seder and the Haggadah. Question is, and I have 4 answers, so get ready, this is going to be big. Why, or what is the significance of dipping this vegetable into salt water? Why do we do this? So I'm going to share with us 4 different answers. The first answer is by the Maharil. The Maharil says, and he's very big, his whole Passover sermon or chapter that he gives always relates to the concept of freedom, dignity, royalty. It's according to the Maharil that is brought down in Halacha that we are supposed to, he was a medieval rabbi, medieval scholar, and he preceded the Shulchan Aruch, and he was always all about making sure that we observe the Passover holiday as royal and as comfortable and as happy as possible. It's because of him that there is a tradition to place beautiful, whether it's silverware or crystalware, out on display, whether it's on the table or on a side table, in order to show signs of royalty. It's also according to him that a tradition came, used to be in the old country, that people would paint their houses right before Passover. Why? To freshen up, to feel free, to feel good, to feel renewed. And this all comes from the Maharil. So guess what the Maharil says? You know why we eat the karpas right now? And you know why we dip it in salt? He says because it's like an appetizer. It's like, I wrote over here, it's like a cocktail. It's something that's going to open up your appetite for the festive meal, for the matzah, and for all the other festive parts of meal that we're going to eat. And that's why we dip it in salt. That's his answer. Another reason, second reason why we dip the vegetable in salt is, according to the Abu Draham, also a medieval scholar, great scholar, he writes as follows. He says, and I'm going to share it with you, if you take the letters of Karpas, you see the letters? Chaf, Reish, Pei, Samech. Does everyone see it well? Okay. Karpas also can be arranged as Samech, Parech. Samech is the numerical value of 60. And Parech means forced labor. He says the reason why we eat Karpas right now and we dip it in salt is alluding to the forced labor that we had in Egypt. How many men were there during the Exodus? 600,000. The Talmud refers to it as Shishim. Samech is 60. Shishim Ribo. Shishim Ribo is 60 times 10,000. One ribo, one large amount of group is called 10,000 people. So 60 times 10,000, 600,000 men were fulfilling avodat parech. They were having forced labor. That's why we eat the karpas, to remember about that bondage and that suffering that we had. The Ben Ish Chai gives a different reason. Okay. The Ben Ish Chai tells us as follows. He says that the salt water reminds us of the tears that the Jews had when they were suffering at the hands of the Egyptians. As we all know, tears are salty. And for that reason, we dip the karpas into salt water. He says, what's the reason? Let's take a step back in our Jewish biblical history. What's the reason why the Jewish people ended up in Mitzrayim, in Egypt? And he reminds us that what broke the camel's back, what was the eventual cause, and the essential cause for that matter, was the sale of Yosef. When Joseph's brothers sold him as a slave, at that point it was sealed in heaven. God decided that the Jewish people were going to be strangers in a foreign land, and they are going to be oppressed by another nation. Not this hard, not as hard as it was taking place for them, but they were set out to be in exile. So what do we do? The Ben Ish Chai says. The Ben Ish Chai says you take a vegetable and you dip it in salt water, alluding to Joseph's coat, who was taken by his brothers and dipped into blood and then brought to their father. That caused a tremendous amount of pain and sorrow and even tears to Jacob. You caused those tears to Jacob, you caused that pain, there will be pain afterwards. And the pain is going to be the tears of the oppression and the bondage and the torture and the slavery that was taking place in Egypt. Look how beautiful the Ben Ish Chai puts it together. He says, look at the word karpas. Karpas is that vegetable we dip in the salt water. The reason why we do karpas is machar pasim. Machar means sold. Pasim was Joseph's beautiful, colorful jacket. Look at the two letters at the end of the word machar, sold. Kar, just like here, kar. And then pasim, pei samich, for the pas. Karpas was because of machar, pasim, because the brothers sold Joseph and dipped his cloak in the blood. That's why we dip the vegetable in the salt water. The fourth answer that I'm going to give comes from Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, one of the great Ashkenazic Torah scholars of around the same time. So this was just over 100 years ago, around the same time as the Ben Ish Chai. And he writes as follows. He says that what we are doing by dipping this vegetable in the salt water is we're thanking God for the miracle of the splitting of the sea and ending it off with drowning all the Egyptians in it. How so? The sea of reeds, was salty. So what we're doing is we're taking that vegetable and we're dipping it in salty water, just as God took our enemies and he dunked them and drowned them in salty water. He gives a beautiful proof for this from the verse. Look at what the verse says. The verse is in Exodus chapter 14, verse 9. It says, "Vayirdefu Mitzrayim acharehem." The Egyptians chased after them, after the Jews. "Vayasigu otam chonim al hayam," and they overtook them at the encampment by the sea. Kol sus rechev paro, every one of Paro's horse, vechelo, and their horsemen, al pi achirot lifnei Baal Tzifon, that's where they were. Look at this. This is talking exactly about when they came to chase the Jewish people. Look at this acronym. This is brought down by Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. Kol sus rechev paro, which means all of the horses that are partaking in Paro's procession. Kar, you see, chaf, kaf, resh, pei, samich, karpas, alluding to the reason why we dip the vegetable in the salt water is because Hashem dipped and drowned our enemies in salt water as well. This is 4 different reasons why we dip the vegetable in karpas, in the salt water. Now we're going to move on to the fourth step in our Seder, and that is Yachatz. Yachatz is when we take the middle matzah of the three, right? We have 1, 2, and 3. We take the middle one and we cut it and we split it. Now, the proper way to do it is, as much as possible, try to split it that you are forming two different letters. You're going to be forming a Daled as well as a Vav. Daled and Vav. Daled should be a smaller piece, and let's say if you have a circle, okay, the top part and one side, so the top and the right side, should be cracked, that you somehow form a Daled, and then the big square in the middle is alluding to a Vav. That big square should be bigger in volume than the Daled. That bigger one is set aside, it's hidden for the Afikoman, and the Daled is placed back in between the other two matzot. So we ask, why are we having to cut it as such? Again, as a Daled, and then the bigger piece as a Vav. Because a Daled and Vav also form the letter Hey. Let me show it to you on the screen. Let me type it for you so you can see. Hey. Let me make it a lot bigger. Does everyone see the Hey? So this Hey really is made out of a Daled. Let me change the font so you can really appreciate this. Okay, maybe not. But you see how there's a Daled? The top part is a Daled, this area, and then this is a Vav. So what we're doing is we are taking the Daled and the Vav, and we are taking this circular matzah, and we are creating Hashem's name. Hey for Hashem. That's how we know. We allude to Hashem, God, as Hashem, the name. So we're taking a matzah, and we are now forming God's name, bringing His blessing to our Passover Seder. So why do we hide the Afikoman? Why do we take, again, that bigger piece, the Vav? Why do we go and hide it? So there's two answers. The Kolbo, he gives an answer, also a medieval scholar. He writes that the reason why we do this is just to engage our children, just to arouse them, to take them and to make them go for that hunt. When no one's looking, someone hides it. It's either always the same hiding spot or you're trying to figure out new ones. But that's the reason why we hide the Afikoman. The Shulchan Aruch gives a different answer, and he says the reason why we hide the Afikoman is to make sure that we have matzah for later on, for the end of the meal, to eat with the Afikoman. Because if everything else is eaten, well, what else are you going to have? So in order to make sure that there is some matzah left over for the Afikoman, that's why we hide it then. So what is the significance of splitting this matzah? I'm going to give 4 different reasons again to why do we split this matzah. Why do we go, besides for going on to creating God's name and bringing it down, but why do we go and split it? The first answer is given again by the Maharil. The Maharil says that the reason why we split the matzah is because we are alluding to matzah. We call it lechem oni, the poor man's bread. And a poor person, as the Jews were poor, they were impoverished when they were living in Egypt. That's why they had to leave in a rush and remember themselves with these flat crackers, because they didn't have time. A poor man, unfortunately, does not eat everything they have right away. They eat half now and they save half for tomorrow. So that's why we are breaking the matzah, because this is the poor man's bread, and we take half now, and half is for later. The second answer is given by the Chatam Sofer. The Chatam Sofer says we are cutting the matzah in 2 different parts, alluding to the 2 different parts of the Seder. The first part is when we mention about the Galut, about the exile, about the hardship and suffering that we had in Egypt. And the second part is the Geulah, the redemption, when we are being saved by God and actually on our exodus out. That's why there are 2, we split into 2, alluding to the 2 different parts of our Seder. The third answer is given by the Ben Ish Chai. And the Ben Ish Chai says something very true, something beautiful, something that we all know. That really the decree for exile was a total of 400 years. Now, God realized that if He would wait the whole 400 years, the Jewish people would be stooped in the impurity, in the 50th level of impurity, and be stuck. So what did he do? God, at 210 years, he brought our time to leave closer. He made the Exodus 190 years early. So what do we do on the Passover Seder? To allude to God cut us some slack. He gave us a break. He cut it almost in half. And therefore we cut it almost in half. We take that middle matzah and thanking God, oh, thank you Hashem for cutting our sentence in half. Even though the other parts, the other 190 years, was dispersed over other exiles, but at least it was not all at one shot because we were not able to bear as a nation at that time all 400 years of exile. The fourth answer is also given by the Ben Ish Chai, and this is because when we split the matzah, we take the larger one and we leave it to the end of the meal. And he explains the reason why we do this as follows. He gives an amazing story. I hope that any of you who get this amazing Haggadah, I'm going to show it to you again, really, really go through it because there are some precious masterpieces in this Haggadah. It is absolutely amazing. So he writes in the Haggadah, absolutely beautiful story about three very clever friends who all said, let's all go out into the world and let's all go see how we can go and develop something new. It's kind of like a college story, right? Three people are in college. They all finish. They're like, okay, let's go out. Let's go start our own little startups. Let's go figure something out. And in 2 years from now, let's all meet at a certain place and let's share our discoveries. And so it was. These three friends, they all went out. 2 years later, they all met at the certain place. Now, mind you, the Ben Ish Chai lived before there was internet, computers, and telephones. So the story, put into that perspective of, let's say, 150 years ago or 120 years ago. Okay, put that into perspective. So he writes as follows. All three went out. The first individual went, and when he came back, he shared with everybody. He shared with them that he created a telescope. Fascinating. He was the inventor, the creator of a telescope. You're able to put, and he brought everyone over, and they all showed, they peeked their eye in it, and they saw hundreds and hundreds of feet away. They were, oh, what an amazing invention. The second individual created the automobile. Look, instead of having to walk, or take the horse and buggy, or a donkey, or a camel, you could get in this apparatus, this new invention, turn the ignition, turn it on, and go really, really far with absolutely no effort. Psst, they're all clapping, love it. And then they looked at the third person. What did you create? He pulled out of his pocket a box of pills. And he said, this is a medicine. This is called the Wonder Medicine. This cures any type of illness. Oh, the friends were so happy. They were clapping. They were ecstatic. Each of them in their own right. So what do three friends, after 2 years, after being years in college together, then 2 years they're out on their own, they come together and they're like, okay, so let's try it all out. So this is what they did. They took the telescope, and the inventor of the telescope was looking around, and oh, he sees very far. He sees the palace, and he sees on the balcony of the palace everybody sad and moaning and groaning, and they figured out that someone must be very, very sick in the king's palace. So number two came up and said, I got a great idea. I have this automobile. We could get there in no time. And Mr. Number 3, you have that wonder medicine. You could save them, and I'm sure we will be rewarded generously. They said, it's a deal. Let's do it. They all jump in the automobile, and they head their way to the palace. They get there in no time. They get to the guards. The guards open them up, and they are seeing the king. They come to the king, and they tell him how they got there and what they have. They tried the wonder medicine on the princess, and the princess was healed. It was she who was sick. After that, the king comes to all three, and then he says, how can I possibly repay you? What can I do to reward you? You know what I'll do? I'm going to turn you into great ministers of my province. They all accepted. And then he said, I'm going to also propose one of you marry my daughter, the princess, the one you saved. So the first one with the telescope gets up and he says, if it wasn't for my telescope, we would have never known, we would have never come. I deserve to marry your daughter. The second one says, what good would your telescope be if we could not come over with my automobile at such a speedy time before she dies? And then the king's nodding. And then number 3 says, what good is your telescope and your car if we did not have the wonder medicine to save her life? The king said, you are all giving very valid points. Let's call my daughter the princess and let her choose. They presented their case in front of her, and she said, I'm going to take Mr. Number 3, because the telescope, as well as an automobile, are very important, and it's because of them that my life is also saved. However, that's all in the past. For the present and in the future, I will need this wonder medicine again, I am sure. And therefore, I am selecting Mr. Number 3 to marry me. This is just a parable, and the Ben Ish Chai says what the moral of the story is. The Talmud tells us that there are 3 partners in every human being's creation. Their father, their mother, and God. Each of them are very, very important. However, there is one which is definitely the most important. And which one is that? Obviously, God. Why is that? Number 1, because one's own parents depend on God as well. So, of course, we owe everything to our parents, but our parents also owe everything to God. So God is definitely above our parents. That's number 1. Second reason why God is obviously more important than our father and our mother is because we need God every moment of our lives. Our parents, and this is to no disrespect, but after a child is born, and especially raised in the early infant years, they become independent. A person is never independent from God. We are always dependent on God. And because of that, God is our number 1, our most important ingredient person in our creation. For that, the Ben Ish Chai says, what we are doing is we are cutting the bigger piece of the matzah. We're leaving it for the end of the Seder, alluding to God, the biggest piece, the biggest chunk of our creation. To the end of the Seder, saying that we need you, God, every step of the way. From the beginning of our life to the end of our life. From the beginning of our Seder to the end of our Seder. And that's why we crack the matzah in half, and that's why the bigger piece is saved for the end. Why specifically is the middle matzah broken? We have the top, the middle, and the bottom. It's the middle one that is cracked in half. Out of all 3 matzahs, to what reason have our sages chosen the middle matzah to be cracked in half? It's a very good question. This is a very, very nice answer. This answer is given by Rabbi Avner Kavas, if anyone sees. This was the rabbi I mentioned, his Haggadah, and this is the rabbi that I mentioned that speaks very often for Hidabrut, which goes around Israel and the world, teaching all types of Jews from all backgrounds about God and about Torah. So this is a very to-the-point Haggadah. Very happy with this Haggadah. It's also on my recommendation list. And he asks this question and answers it most beautifully. The Midrash tells us that at the end of time, at the end of days, at the time of Mashiach, everybody's going to have to give an accounting to God. He's going to judge every single person in every single nation. Unfortunately, as a fact of life, even the Jewish people do have some shortcomings, some blemishes, and unfortunately, there's going to have to be some punishment administered even to the Jewish people. So, the Midrash tells us what's going to be. God comes to Abraham, the patriarch of the Jewish people, and he says, Abraham, your children have sinned. Banecha chateu. What should I do? So what do we expect from Abraham? We expect him to open up in prayer to God, as he did by the city of Sodom. Even though he was rejected, but he prayed and prayed and he prayed and he prayed. So what do we as his descendants expect from our great-great-great-great-grandfather? For him to pray for us. No, you know what the Midrash says Abraham does? Abraham says, God, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I don't have an answer for your question. Okay. So God first went to the grandfather, and then he said, okay, maybe I'm going to go to the one who was with all the children, and that's Jacob, because he had so many children. And he comes to Jacob and he tells him, Banecha chateu, your children have sinned. What shall I do? What do we expect from Yaakov? We expect Yaakov to risk his neck, to put himself on the line, just as he did for his own children, to save them from Lavan, his father-in-law, and to save them from his brother Esav. No. You know what Jacob answers? I don't have an answer for you. So now God has no other choice. He goes to Isaac. And he tells Isaac, Banecha chati'u, I don't know what to do. Your children have sinned, what shall we do? Yitzchak says so cleverly, Banecha? My children? Are they not your children as well, God? God says, yeah, okay. And what's your point? Let's make a calculation. How long does a person normally live? King David says 70 years is a normal time frame for a person to live. So out of 70 years, the first 20 years of a person's life, they are not accountable by Dinei Shamayim in the upper spiritual court. The first 20 years is break. God understands that our teenage years may not be the best of years, and after the fact, he gives us a break for it. So that gives us 50 years. Out of 50 years, half the time a person's sleeping anyways. So that gives us 25. 25 years, half of that time is used for eating, taking care of our bodily needs, cleaning ourselves, prayer. So how much time does a person possibly have to corrupt themselves, to commit sin? Only 12 and a half years out of 70. He was a good negotiator, Isaac. He learned it from his father, by the way, who was a master negotiator also when it came to how many people to save, or on account to be saved, by Sodom. But now, Yitzhak negotiates with God. And he tells him there's only 12 and a half years per person, possibly, that they could have sinned, which is a minority of their lifetime. Let's do this. You, God, you can bear that. And if you can't bear it, alright, let's do half-half. I'll take half upon me, for all Jews, and you'll take half upon you. And you know what? If you don't even want to take half, I'll take it all on me. I have the merit for it. You know why? Because I was the Akedah. I was the human sacrifice that you considered as if I was really slaughtered and burned on your altar. And for that merit, I want to give it to my great-grandchildren and save them from the punishment in the time of Mashiach. And God said, you have a deal. You know why we take the middle matzah, says Rabbi Avner Kavas? He says the middle matzah alludes to Isaac. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. It's not because of Avraham or not because of Yaakov that in the future redemption we will be saved. Rather, it's because of Isaac. And in commemoration and in good thanks and good faith to him standing up for us, we take the middle matzah, and in his merit, we crack it in half. But why crack it in half? Because what did he say to God? He said, I'll take half on me and you take half on you. Half, God! Let's split that middle matzah in half. That was his negotiation technique. Now look at how we have this word. Yachatz, does everyone see this? Yachatz, Yud, Chet, Tzadi, are the same letters as the first three of Yitzchak. Yud, Tzadi, Chet. But there's an extra kuf. So yes, the middle matzah, the Yitzchak matzah, is the one we crack in half. But what do we do with the kuf? That brings us to God's involvement. Kuf is for Kudsha Berichu. God, the Holy One, blessed is He. And because God and Isaac, between the two of them, they split our time of sin in this world. That's 12 and a half years between the two of them, and that's why we split that middle matzah. I thought that was a fascinating, enlightening reason why we split the middle matzah specifically. Now, two last points before our time is up is why do we split this matzah? Why do we crack it before we start the Haggadah? Shouldn't it be later on? Why specifically before? As we know, it's Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. Then we get into Magid. Then we get into the Haggadah. So why do we split it before the Haggadah? So the Kolbo writes, he says, because we want to, what's the first part of Magid is when we say, Ha-lachma anya, this is the poor man's bread. Ha-lachma anya, what's a poor man's bread as we explained? It's a piece of it. It's a half of it. That's why we crack it now. The last point I want to mention this evening, and with this we'll end tonight's class, and then I have some good news for everybody as well. So the last point is is there any significance between these three, the step 3, 4, and 5? And this is as an introduction to Magid, the fifth one. 3 being Urchatz, 3 being Karpas, 4 being Yachatz, and 5 being Magid. Is there any correlation between the sequence of the three? So the Kotzker Rebbe gives a fascinating enlightenment. He says, there's a rule in life that at first we should always be quiet. A person learns much more, gains much more when they are quiet. However, if you need to speak, always speak half of whatever you wanted to say. So look at this beautiful, beautiful sharing with you. Karpas is the acronym of Klal, see the chaf, Rishon, the first rule is Pesatum, always keep your mouth shut. And if you need to speak, Magid, if you need to speak, Yachatz, cut it in half. And that's why he says these three are juxtaposed of Karpas, Yachatz, and Magid, because Karpas, first step is always be quiet. Now, if you need to speak, cut it in half and then speak. And with that, we are finished tonight's class on the first part of the Haggadah. And I have a beautiful good news to tell everybody, and then I'll take questions. The good news is the 3 people that we prayed for last night in the merit of the Zer Shimshon when we were learning our class are all feeling way, way better. They are all infected with the coronavirus, and they're all feeling better. One of them has been in the hospital for multiple days in New York, and unfortunately he's an elder man. He's at least he's in his high 70s, maybe even 80, and the coronavirus got so serious that it turned into pneumonia. It's actually a family member, a distant family member of ours, and they were in the hospital. And today, the day after the night when we all studied the Zer Shimshon in their merit, he came out of the hospital. The other 2 individuals, one of them which was admitted to the hospital and left, another one which is hopefully feeling better as well, are all getting better. So our prayers, our study, our merit of the Zer Shimshon, even during this trying time, is coming to fruition. So we should never let go. We should never give up. We should never put our guard down. We always need to keep on praying. Let me just stop the recording and then I'll take questions.